If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need in one place. Let's explain.
Anchor has tools to record and edit your podcast straight from your phone and computer.
When hosting on Anchor, you could distribute your podcast on listening platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and much more.
It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place.
And best of all, Anchor's totally free.
Jesus Christ. Hi, welcome back to the Raw Reach Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Steele. I'm here with my other host, Mikkel Petrilli.
Howdy, everybody.
We have another new guest here, Melissa.
Hello.
How's it going? You've been on a podcast before? I think you never
This is my first time.
First time.
Amazing.
Yeah. You were once a professor for Mikkel. How long was that ago? Like you said, like 3 years, right?
Yeah, that was like in the fall of 2019.
2019, yeah.
Yeah, before the cough happened, you know. Yeah.
The cough.
Yeah.
What class was it?
Political Science 100. Yeah.
Political Science.
American government.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure he was my only political science student out of a class of 120 or something like that.
Yeah.
One. There's usually one, maybe one out of a class of 120.
Everyone just takes it for like general ed. Yeah.
Damn. I mean, from like high school to I never went to college, right? So like from high school like to a college, that's a large sum of students. How do you keep track of something like that?
Yeah.
I mean, like, what's the largest class you probably taught?
For a while, Cal State Fullerton was offering classes of about 220.
Oh my God.
So to answer your question, in all honesty, you really don't, right? Like there's a system, of course, in place, like a software program in place for the grades.
Yeah.
I think Blackboard once upon a time, and
Blackboard.
Now it's Canvas.
Yeah, I know Canvas, yeah.
So you have the system in place that helps you, of course, document and record grades, take attendance, things like that, offer tests and all that fun stuff.
Software. I think software makes it a lot easier to keep tracks like that.
But otherwise, cool. I don't know who's there, who isn't there, who's supposed to be there, any of that stuff. So.
Yeah, Mikkel told me very little about your previous occupation. What did you do before teaching?
Mainly, when I finished my degree, I got very fortunate and started teaching right away, right out of college. I did that part-time for about a decade, and then in 2012, I pursued a career in law enforcement. And so that's what I've been doing for the last decade. I teach part-time, depending on the schedule, the availability, whether the class offer fits with my work schedule, with my full-time work schedule. But I spend most of my time in jail, to be honest. I mean that literally.
Yeah. Yeah. You probably meet a lot of interesting people, you know, in the jail system. Yeah. What's that like?
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting's a good word. It's been very entertaining. It makes for some great war stories, like at parties and things like that.
Wow.
It's taught me quite a bit about the criminal justice system. One of my favorite parts initially was that I had been in academia for about a decade by the time I got hired. So I could now see all of the things, or a lot of the things, and as a poli-sci major, so criminal justice is part of that, but it wasn't my primary focus. I was able to see a lot of what I had read in terms of theories and hypotheses and even data, recidivism, things like that, or criminal justice system. I was able to see it in real life.
Firsthand, yeah.
Yeah, as opposed to prior to that, I had just, as a college student, I pretty much worked part-time. I was a waitress, so that's kind of how I paid the bills, and got married young, and then was able to have a couple kids, get my college degrees, start teaching right away. So I didn't have any experience with rapists, fortunately. I didn't have any experience with convicted murderers, accused murderers, drug traffickers, the whole 9 yards. So all of a sudden, drug addicts, so all of a sudden that became my world. And it was kind of amazing as an educator to merge the academic and what's just fundamentally theoretical with the real world experience, like the real thing. So you can read about an addict, you can read about gangs, you can read about all the stuff that they charge you exorbitant prices in the form of textbooks. You can read about all of that, and it's a great foundation. It's an important foundation. But then when you're in intake, patting down like a heroin addict, it's a whole new world. So
I think that's like, it's a very eye-opening thing to actually experience something than just reading in a book, of course, or somewhere. Because for me, I grew up north. I grew up in Oakland, a really bad city, and some people talk to me about like, you know, certain things where it's like that they read in a book or whatever. It's like, for me, actually seeing it, it's like I feel like I have like a, you know, like a different I don't know, like a. I feel like most people, if they read something just coming out of like they see on TV or like a book or something, it's like you're gonna have a decent perspective than someone who actually first account experienced it.
Right. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Did you grow up? Where'd you grow up? California?
Southern California.
Southern California.
I grew up in West Covina.
West Covina. That's not too far from me.
Yeah, I grew up in West Covina, and about 19 years old, went with my girlfriends to a nightclub in Riverside. At the time, I don't think I had ever been in Riverside.
Okay.
So I went to a nightclub with my girlfriends in Riverside and met what would eventually become my husband. So a couple years later, we got married. I've been in Riverside ever since.
Oh, wow. That's cool. After 2 years?
Yeah.
Okay. That's cool. Yeah. And you guys have 2 kids now? Damn. How old are they?
19 and 22.
Wow. Are they both in college?
My daughter, interestingly, my 19-year-old daughter just started not college, but trade school.
Oh, okay.
And so she is, which I'm incredibly proud, but she is going to school to become a truck driver. To get her Class A license and to be a truck driver. Yeah, 19-year-old.
Wow.
Yeah, young woman. And she completely breaks all stereotypes because if you were to see her, she's super diva. So I mean, earrings, necklaces, a full-fledged makeup, like eye stuff and accessories on her eyelashes and all of that stuff. But she's her first week in trucking school, and she's working on getting her permit or taking the test to get her permit. So she's she's cool. Doing that, and actually has ambitions one day to open up a coffee shop.
Okay.
So it's kind of as polar opposite as you can get, but those are her dreams, and I'm fully behind her and fully support it. And it's a couple months, and then she'll be able to pay rent. So that's also a good thing too.
Yeah. No. Truck driving. I don't know. I feel like I couldn't do that because like I get like tired really easily. So like I probably have this like fear that I just like fall asleep like while like driving. Honestly. Because like they drive like late, like at night, like for long hours at a time, you know. Yeah,
she loves road trips. Okay. I mean, at this point, I kind of feel like she's romanticizing it a bit. I mean, we don't have any truck drivers in our family or anything, so I'm not sure if she saw it in a movie or on Instagram or what, but
or enjoys the free time, you know.
Like she's kind of romanticizing. She has a dog that she loves like crazy, so she's kind of daydreaming about making good money, especially compared to her job right now. Like she's a barista at Dutch Bros, so she's kind of daydreaming about making good money and kind of having that freedom that comes with sort of your music and your dog and
open road.
Yeah. And then my son, he's 22 and he's going to college. He's going to Cal State San Bernardino. Okay. Looking to be a math teacher and also a youth pastor in the process in the process of planting a church, Faith Fighters, out in Riverside. I'm going to plug it. And so very kind of diverse. Yeah. Definitely. And then professor, political nerd, and jail cop. So we have a lot going on.
Yeah, you mentioned church. I think you mentioned in the conversation that I think you were talking about you were like writing a book or in the process of writing a book. What was the book gonna be about?
It's on my bucket list.
It's on the bucket list.
Yeah,
okay.
I got a bunch of notes and a bucket list, but I want to write a book at some point sooner rather than later on faith and feminism.
Faith and feminism. Okay. What kind of stuff are you gonna be talking about in the book?
Well, as somebody so politics is my sport, right? That probably came out in class. So it's my election night is my what is it? Super Bowl. Yeah. So I can't help it. But my faith, I mean, my faith is something far more important, something much more meaningful. And so it's first, but for sure, my faith, my family. But politics comes in at a pretty close second. So, and personally, I see politics as a way that we can, if we choose to, if we want to, as believers or as people of faith, I see politics as a way that we can live out our faith because there's so much opportunity, at least in theory, to do great stuff. Now, I don't know that our politicians do that, but in theory, it's there, right?
Yeah.
And so I have had throughout my career, and certainly as a woman, as a Christian, as somebody who's unapologetically a Christian feminist, I've had a lot of backlash on both sides, really, because true feminists, or no, let me rephrase that. Liberal feminists, very politically engaged, liberal feminists don't think you can be a feminist and a Christian.
The loudest ones, yeah.
Right. And Christians, generally speaking, don't think that you can be a Christian and a feminist. So I've encountered, like both sides of my world, I've encountered quite a bit of criticism and backlash. And so I'm looking to, I don't know, exonerate the two and show through both scripture and research, political data, that it's not impossible to merge those two principles.
I think a balance or something.
Yeah. So depending on who you're like talking to, like how do you like approach like I guess defending your position on that faith and feminism can coexist. So if you're talking to someone who's like on like the whatever blue haired, like really loud, like feminists attending all like the protests versus like I don't know, like some Christian, who's like very like traditional, kind of like stern in their ways, that doesn't really like buy into the modernization of like women, like having it all, like working, and having the family, all that.
So on the blue haired side, on the blue haired side, I don't personally have a lot of, for lack of a better description, blue haired people in my life, in my social circle. At my job that I'm at in the jail, where I'm there like more than I'm anywhere. Yeah. I work with a bunch of men, and if they are politically engaged, they're conservative. So they're not blue-haired, and they're not married to blue-haired. So when I encounter the blue-haired stereotype female, and I know what you're talking about, it's usually on social media. Okay. Because in the classroom, of course, those students aren't going to challenge me. They're afraid. Yeah, right?
Most of them are quiet. Yeah.
they're afraid it'll adversely affect their grade, too. So I get it typically on social media, and really and I don't spend a bunch of time on social media because I just don't have a bunch of time to spend on social media. Yeah. And plus my mental health matters. Right. But they tend to just block me. They'll call me names. I've been called, one of the main things that I've been called in terms of criticism on social media is dino.
Dino?
The dino. Because I am a registered Democrat.
Okay. A Democrat in name only, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the Democrat in name only. So I've been called a dino a lot. I've been called gaslighting. But the point is I don't get the opportunity typically to defend my position, because as soon as they hear something that is contrary to what they think I'm supposed to be as a feminist, then I usually just get some criticisms, and then I'm blocked, and so then it all disappears, and that's it.
It's really hard to have a civil discourse over like texts over on
in social media.
On social media, it's almost impossible, honestly.
So I love those opportunities, though. I'm not afraid of having a tough conversation. I think that they're important. I think that one of our problems there's a lot of problems with our political system, but the political arena doesn't allow for discourse anymore. I'm not sure that they ever really did, but definitely today they don't allow for civic discourse or for difficult conversations or for disagreement. So yes, I agree. Social media isn't the place to have it, but I don't have many blue-haired people in my world. So if you know one, give her my phone number.
College campus, I don't know.
Yeah, well,
a lot of them exist.
And ideally, but in the classroom, they're not going to speak up. So
yeah, not really.
The problem is, like, I feel like today's internet is kind of like the town square center of, like, I think most majority of people, right? Yeah. And the thing is, it's almost like a funnel effect, where it's like it's a lot of people, but you can't really get your word out correctly. It's just like a bunch of just text, and it's like it's kind of hard to have a really good conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even though that's the place where everyone meets, where everyone talks. It's an issue.
And it is the the modern day town square. So it's tough because it's, for all the great things potentially that are there with social media or certainly technology, the algorithm, I mean, I think it just sort of sets the stage for a further, like it exasperates intolerance, I feel like. And then the echo chambers. I agree. And so we become very much, and we already sort of have that tendency to be tribal anyway. I think that's kind of human nature. But then when you add the ability to block, the algorithm that's just going to tell you what you want to hear and what you're looking at. Yeah. So it makes it, as a political science professor, it kind of makes it tough, because that's why I always wanted to maximize what was it, an hour class or a 3-hour class?
It was a 3-hour class at night, yeah.
So I always wanted to maximize it because that's all I got, I feel like.
Yeah. No, I know there was I don't know if you remember this, but there was this one kid in class, he asked this question. I don't remember what the context was, but he was like, well, like, how can you thrive in a society where when our country doesn't give an F about you or about me? And he was black. He was a black kid. He's like, and I don't know, the whole class kind of got quiet after that,
Right.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember that happening. He's like, yeah, this country, basically, how can we thrive? This country doesn't care about you, doesn't care about me or whatever,
Right.
He's trying to say, this country doesn't care about women, doesn't care about, colored people either,
Were we in Mahalo Hall?
It was in humanities.
Oh, it was in the humanities building. Okay. Mm-hmm. I do, I don't specifically remember the student, but the outbursts come few and far between, so I usually remember those outbursts. How did I respond? Was it nice and politically correct?
Yeah, no, it was nice. It was nice and everything. Yeah, but I remember this one kid. He was really shocked. He was like, "What the?" He said that loud. It was I don't know. I think they kind of started talking about it a little bit.
Yeah,
but I think we brought back to the normal lecture after that.
To whatever was on the PowerPoint.
Yeah, but yeah. So I was like, I don't know, that guy had the balls to just say that in front of the class of whatever 200 people, to say that. It was wild. Yeah, but I don't know if that how often that happens or whatever, stuff like that, in the classroom. I think that's kind of the only instance where I remember an outburst like that. I know students have I've heard them debate about stuff before in class, but I don't know how often an outburst happens,
Yeah, once a year.
Once a year, okay.
It tends to be, at least in my class, it tends to be a rare occurrence. I just think in general students are, they don't even really want to be in class, right off the bat. So there's that. The kind of apathy just because there's 100,000 things they'd rather be doing.
Yeah.
They tend to not be politically engaged. They tend to not be informed, all of those things. And then sort of fear of looking dumb, sounding dumb. All of those things tend to discourage outbursts.
Yeah.
But you do have that occasional bold student. And I mean, I think it's great. I encourage it. It can be one of those awkward, moments.
It was awkward.
I've had, what have I had? I had a student holler at me because I said something, I think I said something positive about Hillary Clinton. And I don't remember what it was. It was before she ran for president. But I said I just made a positive statement. And one of the things that not just students, but people do is, unfortunately, they tend to assume if I say, or anybody, not just me, but if something positive is said about an elected official or a politician, or I don't even recall, maybe she was Secretary of State at the time, but a positive statement means that I'm liberal.
Yeah.
Or as a negative statement, maybe against Hillary Clinton, means that I'm conservative. And that's just, I mean, that's another major issue. But
so if you say something positive, it's you must agree with everything she says or whatever,
Right, and vote for her and support her and love everything about her, and then conversely hate everything about the Republicans and things like that, which is unfortunate, not just something that student did, but we just, as a society, we tend to be in that place of just the snap judgments, and we want everything to be in this nice box, and so that way we can check the box and move forward. So that was interesting, and I just sort of presented a different side, and truthfully, I'm not a super big fan. There's things about her that I admire, but I didn't vote for her. So that's probably shocking, but I didn't.
In 2016?
I didn't vote for her as much as I can't wait to see a female become president. I'm waiting for that and pretty confident it'll happen before I die. Crossing my fingers. Yeah, I didn't vote for her. So
You think Nikki Haley's gonna get far in the Republican primaries?
I think she's going to be able to hold her own. I don't think she's going to land the ticket, but I think she'll be able to hold her own for a little bit. She's got enough attention, enough popularity. And then what was his name? That CNN guy, was it CNN?
Don Lemon.
He just kind of boosted her her profile there just a little bit.
Yeah, he made like a comment being like he was saying how she's not in her prime, you know. She's like, and the other women, they were like, wait, what do you mean by that? Like, it was a pretty overtly sexist comment that he said. And he was like, well, I mean, like, if you Google the definition. And
he tried to backpedal, but it didn't go over well. And then I think the next day he was out sick, or I'm not sure what happened, but I don't think he'll get let go over it. But I think he got his hand slapped over that one.
Yeah.
And the females were visibly like, what?
Yeah, I know. They were surprised, yeah.
Oh, my God.
It's like, hey, this isn't Fox News. What do you... Anyway, did I answer your question?
I think so. Yeah. No, yeah, but I guess, like, somewhat, like, related to the feminism and faith. So in the summer, the Dobbs decision, it overturned Roe versus Wade. So after, like, 50 years of precedent where, like, you know, abortion is kind of, you know, the law of the land, no longer. It's like left to the states now. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I thought that was incredible. Like, I thought it was incredible. And I was talking about that in class too. I was talking about that in class because I saw the writing on the wall. And before, I'm not sure if Trump had even been elected president yet, or maybe it happened like a minute after he got elected president. But I saw Mississippi, the state legislature. I saw what they did. And I was just like, oh my God, like I knew what they were doing. Yeah. And I knew the intention was for it to land before the Supreme Court. And it takes a while. Those things take a while. So it took a few years. But sure enough, it landed before the Supreme Court. And because the court was made up with the composition that it is, I was like, there's a chance this might happen. And of course, all the Democrats and anybody that I know that's even somewhat liberal, and even people that I know that are conservative but moderate, they were thinking, no, right? This is, talk about settled law. Yeah. This is 2023, right? Settled law. And so the sports thing, so I was just watching it. I was, when the draft got leaked, I happened to be working in a pod that night. I was on night shift working in a pod. I logged on and I read, it was, I think, a 22 or 23 page decision or something like that. Yeah. So that, I would say, is why we need to be engaged, why we need to pay attention. As a Christian, it is tricky. I'll admit it is tricky. And my Christian brothers and sisters in Christ, they won't have this conversation with me. And the couple times I've had it, there's tension. It's difficult. It's a challenging conversation to have. But for me personally, I just look at it from the vantage point of separation of church and state. That's something, because I had a hard time when I made the decision to become a Democrat. It was a big decision for me. Yeah. I was a poli-sci major, getting a master's degree in political science, and I felt that it was important that I chose my party affiliation for reasons like consistent with my principles and my research and my education, and not just because all of academia in California, right, is liberal or Democrats. So the abortion thing was a difficult thing for me to reconcile between my faith and the Democrats being very staunchly pro-choice. But no matter what, in a two-party system, there's not going to be a party that you fully align with, no matter what your values look like. And I see that the Democrats, especially at the time, the party has changed quite a bit in the last even 5 years. Yeah. But at the time when I finished my degree, I saw the party as slightly more in their platform, maybe not how they behave on the congressional floor, right, on the House floor, but in their platform, I saw Democrats as more consistent, slightly at least, slightly more consistent with biblical values than the Republicans, which is super controversial. So I don't know how that'll go over for whoever heard me say that. But again, my perspective. Yeah. And so I chose to be a Democrat. And as far as the pro-choice position, which I am pro-choice, though I would never encourage someone to get an abortion, never want to see someone get one, never encourage it, but I'm nonetheless pro-choice, and it's because I believe in separation of church and state, and I just feel that my faith is most secure when separation of church and faith is honored by our government. And so with that, I can hold my personal convictions and value system. I'm against abortion as far as I wouldn't encourage anybody to have an abortion. I wouldn't have an abortion, so I'm against abortion in that sense. And but I'm also against pornography, right? But I don't believe that we should legislate according to my biblical views or my faith, and that is at the heart of separation of church and state. And so with that, I can have peace about being a Christian Democrat and pro-choice.
That makes sense. Very consistent.
Yeah.
I see.
But I'd be hard pressed to find a Christian that agrees with me.
I mean, I think what you said that the Democratic Party is more, I guess, aligned with like the religious aspect. You said something along those lines, right?
The platform in terms of what it seeks to accomplish for the country. Like if you read the platform, and I've read the platform a lot, especially once I started getting accused of being a dino. So if you read the platform, and obviously not everything, but there's a lot in the platform that's consistent with biblical values. The idea that Jesus, right, he didn't own a home, which I'm for home ownership, so that's a different topic. But the point is, he didn't own a home. It wasn't about wealth. The Bible talks about taxes. It talks about taking care of the poor. It talks about being generous, giving, loving your neighbor. All those things that it talks about, I think you can make a lot of that happen through government, and the Democratic platform embraces more of it than the conservative platform does, the Republican platform. Though there's certainly things within the Republican platform that are consistent with scripture and biblical values too, but in a two-party system, you really have to pick one. And so I lean slightly left for all kinds of different reasons, and so I go with the two-party, or I've picked Democrat. That was 20-something years ago when I was finishing my master's degree. At this point, I'm not even against changing parties, because at this point, the parties have kind of morphed and they look like almost the same to me.
The lines have blurred by a lot, especially in the last, I think the internet. I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And so anyhow, so that's kind of how I came to that place. And
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I say to any Christian who's willing to have that conversation with me. That's along the lines of how I explain it.
Yeah, that is interesting, because I feel like I think for Democratic voters, it's mostly made up of white college educated like secular people, and like religious minorities as well. You know, so I feel like those two or those like different groups like living together, it's almost like contradictory in a sense, but it does like I do agree that like I see like a lot more Democrats who are religious. I don't know if like you've seen that as well, but like I feel like I'm seeing that like a lot more Democrats like are more likely to be Christian in some senses, I think. Like I found that like in like my own like anecdotal evidence, that's what like I find to be true. Like that might be tricky, because like online I feel like your like stereotypical like Republican is like someone who's like, you know, like religious, like very like pro-America, but I mean the religious like voter is like it's a huge like it's a huge majority, I would say, like of the country, you know. And I think a lot of that definitely is like in the Democratic Party, you know. So I don't really find that too surprising though that you came to that conclusion.
I think I haven't checked numbers lately, but I think if you're going with registered voters, I think that Republicans are, or I think more Christians, and it's probably small in number, but I think more Christians are registered Republicans than they are Democrats.
Yeah, that's probably true.
But then it would also depend on, are you talking, I mean, Christian is a pretty general term, so are you talking, there's a difference
like
between
practicing Christians.
Well, and there's also a difference between Jews, right? The Jewish community, Catholics, Protestants, Baptists. So you can dig deep to get a real accurate sense. But at least in my world, the Christians that I know if they're even registered, because some Christians just don't even bother, right? Some Christians are apathetic.
Don't vote.
But if they do, then they're usually, at least in my world, Republican.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness, and in that kind of, it's a Christian, but you're told to never be part of politics. And I didn't know that a lot of actual like religious people just completely shut out politics like their entire life, you know. But I feel like that's such an important like fundamental thing that it goes on with your life. That's like it's it dictates a lot in your life. But a lot of religious people shut that up. But I've been seeing a lot of new trend where like people are getting into politics recently. I don't know. I don't know if that's going to be like a thing that's going to change in my family's, you know, like, because I feel like religion has been changed throughout society. I think society does change religion. I think religion does change society as well. I feel like a lot of things like back then, you know, you would have to, I think in the Roman Catholic Church, you would wear, like 50 years ago, you had to wear like a veil over the head. You don't do that anymore.
Well,
you know?
there's certain like churches, like I think like if you go to a Latin mass, and they have some, I think the closest to where I live is like Arcadia, but I've been to them. Like the women will wear veils over there, so they do exist, but it's not like as like popular,
as common as it used to be.
Like ever since I think the mass of I think John Paul, I think it was like in 1969, that like kind of transformed the Catholic Church.
Also in Portugal, I've been recently like a lot of women priests, they hold communions, do the communion wafer and stuff like that, and I think that's starting to be more common. You know.
I love that.
Yeah,
equality.
I think it changes. Yeah, it changes throughout the years. You know, just like society changes, I do believe like religious practice or old traditional standards, it does change a little bit to catch up with society.
It sort of has no choice. By chance, did either of you see the Jesus Revolution movie?
I did not.
I did not either.
Just, I mean, if you have an opportunity, if it's of interest, it shows that what you're saying exactly, at least from the perspective of Southern California, because it goes through Greg Laurie. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Greg Laurie is a pretty prominent Christian pastor. He's out right now he's out in Riverside, but Chuck Smith, in any case, it shows a pretty massive change in Christian culture from what things looked like in the 50s and 60s when everybody was wearing a tie and a jacket and women would wear dresses, and when church was formal, and it shows a pretty significant, if not impressive, transformation over the course of about a generation, over the course of maybe a 25-year period. And that's exactly what the movie shows, is how society does change church, but church also changes society. So
yeah, I know.
Kind of cool.
Like my father told me, like back in the 80s, you know, like rock music and metal was like completely demonized.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? And now it's like I see these congregations. They're like trying to like make up rap songs, and you know, they have all these, you know, they're trying to get more like youth influence for people to go to church like
pop
that.
Culture.
Yeah, trying to get more pop culture, more trendy, you know, stuff like that. Which I think that's a good sign, a very good thing. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
Because like I actually experienced a lot of that when I used to go to church for the youth group. They would always have a little band there too, but they would also obviously be Christian songs. But yeah.
Yeah, but eventually. like
throw in a drum and maybe shake the hips a little.
Yeah,
right.
They're throwing it back. Yeah.
I think more humanized, honestly, that too, because I don't know, like or more like it has. I feel like as a kid, you're kind of like, oh man, like I don't want to go to church. It's so boring, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But what you're doing is kind of like. You're kind of catering to the younger people, you know, trying to get them to be more involved, because it's other more than just like blah, 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 bunch of words, you know, like you don't really pay attention. You want to go and play video games or, you know, play with your toys or whatever. But now it's just like, wow, this is loud, this is entertaining, this is something I can get into, I can focus, you know, and you get really into, you know, stuff like that. But, were you born into being a Christian? Was it you made your decision yourself?
Kind of both. My mom is a Christian. My dad was Catholic. My dad was an interesting sort of Catholic though. My grandmother, my grandmother she should have been a nun. So she got caught up in a moment with my grandfather, and
oh no,
and then that kind of shot her chances of being a nun. But so she would do the rosary.
The rosary,
yeah, like faithfully, constantly. My dad, not so much. He was a Catholic, sort of the same way he was an American. That was the extent of his Catholicism. But my dad, nonetheless. So my dad, my grandmother, definitely the exposure to Catholicism. My mom, a Christian, and then they divorced when I was a kid, and she actually we started going to Calvary with Raul Reese. So that was one of the reasons why I was really excited to see the movie, because it depicts that change within Christian culture. So 9, 10 years old, just kind of that stereotypical, I was a kid, went to Christian camp, became a believer because of the fire insurance, right? The idea that I didn't want to die and go to hell.
Yeah.
Right.
So became a Christian.
Fire insurance, yeah.
Based on that kind of idea. But it was still real to me, but that's just being honest. That was the extent of it at the time. And then as I got older, it became real to me. When I started driving, I would go to church on my own because I wanted to. Even though I met my husband in a nightclub, I think I didn't survey or anything, but probably in hindsight, we were the only Christians in the nightclub. And we weren't really behaving like Christians, so you couldn't tell to look at us, but we were in terms of our faith and what was real and in our heart. So we, the only 2 Christians, I think, in the nightclub we met, started dating. A few years later, got married, and we have raised our children in Sandals. If you've heard of it, it's out in Riverside. It's
Sandals.
Now it's a mega church. It wasn't when we started, but raised our kids in Sandals, and so here we are.
Okay, that's cool. You spoke of the separation of church and state. Do you look to as Thomas Jefferson as like a great example of like one of the founding fathers who like truly believed? Because I think it was like originally coined because of a letter he wrote to a friend of his, where he spoke of like separation of church and state. I think when he was president, I think he like wouldn't do like a prayer or something like that, and a lot of his like political opponents like would accuse him of being an atheist at the time. It was like really controversial for the time. So like Thomas Jefferson, someone you like look to for that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like a model?
I mean, haven't like read his books and stuff like that. Not to that extent, but definitely it's a concept that I know he I don't want to say made popular, but he's attributed to. But it's part of our history. I know it's not in our Constitution or anything like that, other than the Establishment Clause, which sort of speaks to it. It's not written out that way, but the Establishment Clause certainly speaks to this concept of separation of church and state. And it's been something between the 2 parties. It's been something that Democrats have embraced and Republicans have fought against. But again, from my perspective, I think it's our best hope, because we are a country, right, of immigrants. We are a country, at least in theory, of diversity. I have some things I could say about that, but diversity, and in Southern California, known often as the melting pot. So with that comes Christianity, Catholicism, Jehovah's Witness, Mormons,
lots of different religions.
Muslim, exactly. So my perspective is, I want to be able to freely worship, and that's per the Establishment Clause, right? I want to be able to freely worship according to my values, according to my faith, and I don't want the government to come in and tell me how I can or can't do that within reason, like obviously human sacrifice and stuff like that. But that off the table, I don't want the government to tell me, and this was one of many issues I had with the shutdown. But I don't want government to tell me how I can or cannot worship, or breaking of bread is something that's very sacred in the Christian faith. I don't want government to tell me that I can't participate or we can't participate because of whatever reasons the government decides in breaking of bread, things like that. Certainly what Christians, I think, in general fail to sort of recognize is clearly if the president is Christian, and I know a lot of presidents have said that they are Christian. So if the president is Christian, then they're 100% behind it, because that's awesome. But it's not a prerequisite, nor should it be, that you're a Christian to be president. So we have a history, because of our Christian foundation. We have a history of Christian presidents, or at least men that will say they're Christians because they understand that history. But what happens when we have a Muslim president or a Catholic president, which
JFK,
Christians were very afraid that we were going to have to serve the Pope or something like that, because so what happens when somebody is in office, or somebody is our governor, or on any level of government that isn't a Christian, that embraces some other religion that is contrary to the Christian faith? Then what? Then we're going to want separation of church and state. So the concept is a good concept. That doesn't mean we should have to throw out morality, but the concept is a good concept, and that means that my faith and the ability to practice that faith is most protected when government is staying out of my business, out of my faith, and the practice and the expression of that.
For sure, yeah. You speak about, I guess, like government and like government interfering like in our lives. Do you think that the government like had too much? Was too invested in our lives during the shutdowns that like occurred in the aftermath of the the cough, the 2020, like what happened around there?
We don't say the word, right?
Yeah, I don't.
Because I mean,
I don't know. Like, I just think it's funny, but
right. But doesn't it? I don't know if they're still doing it, but you'll get some kind of warning on YouTube, right?
Misinformation. You know? Yeah.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. Government, in my assessment, grossly breached its constitutional authority, and I would say its ethical obligation to its people. Absolutely, and I have a long list of grievances. I don't know how long we're going to be.
We have time.
This conversation. I have a long list of grievances, but one of them that I had immediately, because everything sort of unfolded. So my grievances grew as the 2-week curve. It turned into a 2-year tragedy. But it was because I was at home on Easter Sunday, and I suppose this would have been because the emergencies were declared, I think, in middle March 2020.
So 3 years ago. Yeah.
So it was a couple weeks after the federal government and the states had declared, not just, I think the WHO declared the pandemic, but it was within a couple weeks of that national and eventually world declaration about the pandemic, the emergency. And I'm at home on Easter Sunday, and my whole life, as long as I can remember, I went to church on Easter Sunday. It's a very important, sacred. It's a sacred day. So I went to church on Easter Sunday. But during the pandemic, it was the first time in my knowledge, in my lifetime, that I literally couldn't go to church. There wasn't a church to go to. And the reason there wasn't a church to go to was because government said the churches couldn't be open. Government closed down the churches, and clearly government closed down everything, and I have an issue with all of that. But I mean, the I don't know, the hair salons, the nail salons, that's not expressly written out in the Constitution, but our right to worship freely, and the Establishment Clause, and with the Establishment Clause, the concept of separation of church and state, that is in the First Amendment. That is a constitutionally protected right, and you can't argue it. So for the government to suddenly say that we can't go to church, I can't go to church, for them to infringe on that right, I was like at my house pacing and complaining and posting on social media that our church leaders accepted it, that Christians accepted it. And that if there was anything, you mentioned Christians in general, or people of faith in general, some have nothing to do with politics, right? They think they're kind of absolved. I don't know why, but I know that that's a common sentiment. And so if there was anything, or any reason even, but if anything for Christians and people of faith to get politically engaged over, I would say it was government telling us that we can't come together on Christmas to celebrate and to worship the resurrection of Jesus, right? Like it's that's the whole. I mean, that's the crux of what's so important about Christianity, and we weren't able to because government said so. It was a huge eye opener for me in across the board, politically, spiritually, and even just psychologically, the human condition, and so on and so forth. But that was the first of me saying, what is going on? I mean, it's right there. You don't have to be a genius to read that First Amendment. Yeah. And then the list just goes on and on, the way that they forced small businesses to shut down, the way that they allowed for Jack in the Box to be open, but the nail salons
it's essential.
The nail salons couldn't be. And
it was honestly embarrassing, honestly. Really embarrassing.
It's still like 3 years later, I just think, was it some kind of like Martin Scorsese sort of movie that we watched? Was that a movie?
It was the Twilight Zone.
Or did that happen? Which, speaking of, did you see Woody Harrelson's monologue on SNL?
A little bit of it. It was pretty funny.
See some clips, yeah.
I was like, oh, dang. Like SNL, I wonder, did they know? Or did he just, because it's live, did he just jump on that opportunity?
I'm pretty sure he did the same thing like Dave Chappelle and all those other people. They kind of send in like a rough, like, draft of what they're planning to say, but they don't follow it.
It's spur of the moment, you know what happens.
And then there's like, you can't censor it. It's just, I guess you're going to take down SNL.
Pretty raw.
Yeah.
So, but in any case, it happened, and I saw a funny reel though the other day, a young comedian talking about now they have the young comedian, I think he's a millennial, maybe a Gen Z. So now he has like a story to get back at his grandparents that, you know, you might have had the Great Depression, but I suffered through the pandemic.
Oh yeah. We're gonna be telling our kids that, you know, our grandkids.
You know what I had to do? There was no toilet paper.
And throughout the years, it just constantly exaggerates even more and more. People were dropping like flies and stuff. You know, stuff like that. But for me, I thought it was like a complete eye-opening thing when it was like. I was hearing all these people. A lot of people were telling us like, "Oh, I can't go to the church. I can't do that." Whatever. But then I would go on and talk to other people or friends. They're like, "Oh yeah, but the strip clubs are open." And I was like, "Okay, so like that is okay.
That's essential.
Like that's essential.
Social distancing.
That's essential. And that's
they'd wear masks.
And that's gross and disgusting because that's contact on contact people, but you can't have like, you know, outside somewhere, you know, someplace. You can have bring congregate people and worship, you know, like that. How is that okay? Or, you know, okay, even during this was like when you can, I think, go out to dinner like Denny's or something like that, but you can take off your mask to eat. You know, but it's like, but when you're walking to that, like, but still, no, you can't congregate. Yeah, you can't have any congregation of like churches like that. Still, even during that, that's what I think is embarrassing. Yeah, it's embarrassing. It's wrong. Yeah. And for me, it's like, I can realize that I'm no longer religious. I don't practice a faith or something like that, but I can still see when something's wrong, and that was definitely wrong. Of people to do that, or our government to do something like that. And don't get me started about like the calculations. You know, these people make up like estimate on people how people are getting sick, and like, you know, like people were. I remember there's reports of people being claimed in the hospital that they had COVID, but it's like, or something, they died of COVID when they just got into a car accident or something like that.
Oh. Yeah, I think the CDC rolled back a lot of like, not like a lot, but like a decent chunk of that.
A percentage.
Yeah, decent percentage. They had to roll back.
Crazy.
Various counties did. I mean, maybe a year or two later, but various counties did adjust their numbers. And you're right, it wasn't by 50%, but they adjusted their numbers because they did initially, somebody gets shot in the head or somebody dies in a car accident, and they did initially count that as a COVID death.
Yeah.
If they
had COVID.
If they tested positive for COVID. And what they also allowed for, and I can say this with confidence because I read the actual CDC language, because I just, if I can, I go to the original source always. So I read the CDC language, and they actually allowed for doctors, if there wasn't an opportunity or a means to test them for COVID, especially because initially there wasn't. The first 2 or 3 months we didn't have widely available anything. They allowed the doctors to make a determination based on the symptoms of the person if they had COVID. So not only does that for sure going to affect the numbers, and it could affect them up or down, right? But at the same time, the federal government was giving any COVID death, giving that hospital for any COVID death, all kinds of money.
Right.
So there was an incentive, and I don't know that doctors did, but statistically you have to just assume some of them did.
Yeah.
There was an incentive to determine, and legitimately, because the CDC allowed for it, an incentive for doctors to determine, even in the absence of a positive test, that COVID wasn't I supposed to say that?
No, you can say it's fine.
The cough,
I was just
That's
saying.
fine.
that it was the cough thing was a contributing factor. So it just you know that when money's involved with anything and everything, there's going to always be corruption, and so it set the stage. It incentivized corruption in a time that we were already in a pandemic and freaking out, and all of these awful things were happening across the board to small businesses, to single moms, to students, to kids. Just I still can't believe that it happened, and I can't even believe how much support it got.
Yeah, especially like when the vaccine dropped, there was like a big like a push to, you know, like on a lot of private businesses, a lot of like government agencies to like mandate, you know, their employees get vaccinated, you know. And when the booster became available, you know, there was like, even like Cal State Fullerton, they if you wanted to attend in-person classes, they mandated you get the booster shot as well. Yeah, so you know, I got the 3 jabs, you know, right here, you know. But I think you could have done like a religious exemption, but I don't think many people did that. But yeah, I thought that was like also like very interesting. I wondered what you thought about that.
Oh, the vaccine,
the mandates, yeah,
the vaccine mandate, yeah, just the mandate. Just the mandate. Unfortunately, it turned into something that anybody who was critical at all of the mandate were automatically an anti-vaxxer, which is kind of part of all of the lunacy that came out of COVID and all those measures. So I am not at all against the vaccine, but I was 100% against the vaccine mandate, and even still would love to, because again, in general, between liberals and conservatives, at least just based on social media, my experience on social media, conservatives seem like they're at least willing to have a conversation. Liberals, for some reason, just don't want to have the conversation. They'll just block you and be disparaging and then block you. So I would still to date love, maybe if there's a future episode, we could bring on a left, maybe a very left or a diehard supporter of the vaccine mandate, because of all the things that just boggled my mind. One of them was how Democrats could get behind a vaccine mandate, because it's so contrary to what Democrats stand for. It's so contrary to the idea of choice, of pro-choice. It's so contrary to the fundamentals of that. And yet so many Democrats, so many liberals got 100% passionately, if not indignantly, for anybody that chose not to get it, behind the idea of forcing at almost any and all means necessary people to be vaccinated, just no matter what, just because, I guess because Dr. Fauci said so. I don't know. I don't understand it. Do either of you have?
Yeah, I mean, for everything else, like the government has pushed it. Everyone's been so like critical or like so like question about like, you know, what the government pushes, right? But just the vaccine, everyone was just super compliant. Yeah, and I thought it was like such a weird switch, you know, for some reason, just like, oh yeah, like vaccine, yeah, sure, I'll take it, you know. But everything else, why be so critical about like the vaccine now?
Yeah, I think people were scared. They probably like, I don't know, this is like a new thing, you know, people
just shock, fear.
Didn't like experience this, you know, so maybe they're just like, you know, certain people like are blindly like loyal, and then you have like the other side who's like really like critical, like they're like, I don't trust anything, you know. So like it's different ends of the spectrum. But I mean, I don't know, like, yeah, like you said, like I'm pro-vaccine as well, but like I just have an issue, you know, like when the government's mandating it, you know,
with the mandate. And I understood it on so many different levels, just the principle. So I'm behind the principle of me being able to make choices about my body. And so it just stands to reason, or you would think it stands to reason, that if that's a principle that I believe in, that I would apply that principle. And again, Democrats, because that is a principle, pro-choice is a principle they believe in, that they would apply it across the board. Prior to the mandate, especially in California, but it could be said nationally, prior to the mandate, we have court cases on the books that goes from state of California up to the U.S. Supreme Court that support pro-choice to the extent I have, except for the mandate, I have so much sovereignty over my body and choices about my body that in the state of California, if something happened to my kids and my kids needed blood, say my kids needed a blood transfusion, maybe my kids needed bone marrow, there are Supreme Court decisions or court decisions that allow me to say no. So if I wanted to say no, if my kid needed any piece of my body in order to live, I have the constitutional right to say no, that I don't want to donate blood, that I don't want to donate an organ or bone marrow or anything. Now, in my particular case, never, ever, ever would I not.
Right.
But I just know that those are my rights. Like, that's how far body autonomy has gone in this country, and particularly in the state of California, that I cannot be forced to donate blood to save the life of anybody, including my own children. So how I could suddenly be forced to take a vaccine to save others was just so contrary to what the Democrats have stood for, so contrary to case law, so contrary to the concept of body autonomy, that I still can't believe they somehow made most, not all, but most liberals, and again, the ones that I interacted, somehow made that connection to it's okay to force African Americans. I mean, you know the history about the Tuskegee experiment and I'm not sure if I said that right, but you know what I'm talking about, and the syphilis experiment. That didn't even officially stop until something in the 70s. I think it was 73, 74. That didn't officially stop on the part of the federal government until the 70s because of a lawsuit.
Yeah.
So for African Americans, any African American that was hesitant, they had good reason.
Right.
They had good reason to be hesitant. And so Democrats were basically supporting the force vaccine for African Americans, for single moms, for the working class. And if you play out that mandate, it really targets the working class. It doesn't affect the wealthy. The wealthy didn't have to make a decision about their blue-collar job and a vaccine. They didn't have to make a decision about feeding their kids or taking the vaccine. So really, it just targeted the working class. Even in my jail, my particular sheriff, who's been pretty controversial, my particular sheriff gave us the option of the vaccine or test. And that was legitimate. That was a legal option that California had. Okay. Not all employers took that option, but they had it legally. That was the decision that he made as it related to the vaccine. But in my jail, here I am taking inmates, convicted criminals, convicted murderers to the hospital, and they get the choice. They get to say, the medical staff offers them the vaccine and they get to say yes or no. They retained choice. But so many of my partners in other agencies and the working class in general didn't get to retain that choice. And most especially single moms or those in lower paying jobs, they don't have those kind of choices. So on top of everything else that the Democrats did wrong with that, they unduly burdened and put a really like a gun to the head of the working class, which is in theory who they represent, who they're supposed to be the underdog, who they're backing, and took away their choice, while homeless people, incarcerated people, wealthy people, they retain different sections of Congress even, or of the federal government. I think it was Congress was exempt as well. So different specialty assignments or different special people all retain choice, but not the working class. Yeah, I was fundamentally and still am fundamentally against it.
Yeah, for sure. No, yeah, that's wild to me. Yeah, and I think like, you know, looking back on this years from now, people will most likely realize like how like ridiculous like this was, you know, like for America to go through. I mean, like in the beginning, I understood like everyone was scared. We were all afraid. No one really knew what was going on. But once like the vaccine became available, you know, I think, you know, hey, you have the choice to get this, you know, you have to take a risk assessment if you think like it's, you know, it's better for you, better for, you know, the people around you to get the vaccine, then
Absolutely.
you should have the option to take it. But if you don't want to, then yeah, sure, it's your body. You know, I think you should, you know, have a choice. You know, what you inject, you know, in your body, in that sense. But yeah, but really quick. So yeah, we have like talked a lot about like, I guess like feminism, you know, like in the modern world. So this guy has this will probably be the last thing we talk about because we're short on time. But this guy's gained a lot of traction this past year. He's a really controversial figure. He's being investigated. He's in jail. Andrew Tate. Yeah, I'm curious to know what you think about him. Do you think he's like a net like positive, or you think he's like ultimately like just like a net like, you know, negative for like men and women generally?
Yeah. Well, as we speak, right, he's incarcerated.
Yeah.
So depending, I mean, I have no idea what the evidence looks like. I don't even know the criminal justice system it's Romania.
It's Romania, yeah.
So I have no idea. I can't speak to any of that. If he's convicted, then I think his influence, he's going to cease to exist. I think if he's convicted, then maybe in 5 years, we're not going to know who he is. Mm-hmm. I don't like him. I'm sure that's not surprising. I don't like him. So that's not surprising. I see his value nonetheless. I don't like him, but I see his value. And what I mean by that is, even though half the stuff that comes out of his mouth makes me nauseous, really.
I agree.
He it seems if you're going to take him at face value, if you're going to ignore the fact that he's a brilliant marketer, if you're going to ignore the fact that controversy, no matter what it is, almost always elevates, right? Just as the Don Lemon did for Haley. Yeah. Not to the same extent as Tate, but the bottom line is controversy attracts attention and it raises notoriety. So that would go hand in hand with the marketing. So if you take all of that out of the equation and just take him at face value, he speaks his truth. And I think we need more of that. He speaks his truth. I think we need more of that. I don't like what he says. I wouldn't let my kids are young adults, but if they were younger, I wouldn't let my kids watch him or take him in. I don't think in that sense he's a good influence. What I respect is that he speaks his truth, assuming it's his truth, that he's bold and he'll speak his truth, that he doesn't appear to care about the backlash, that he's holding to his convictions. Those are things that I think we need more of. Not in such a sexist way, obviously sexist, disparaging way, a crude way, right? So you can do that with maintaining some integrity and some value and respect. So I don't think he's a good influence on, say, the youth. Yeah. I think what Tate demonstrates, or the fact that he's so popular among young men, is it demonstrates how much our country needs role models. We need role models.
Definitely.
Yeah.
We need principled people, and I'm not calling Tate principled, but principled people to reach out, to appeal to young women too. We young women need it as well. But I don't know who there probably is a female counterpart to Tate. I don't know if it's Kim Kardashian or who it is, but young women need it too. But I think it speaks to his popularity, especially from what I understand. It's very almost worshiping on the part of males. It speaks to a desperate need for attention, for support, for a sense of purpose, for guidance in who you are and who you should seek to be, and things that are clearly lacking in 1,000 different ways. So I think it speaks to that. And for all the people that are so indignant, and I know feminists in particular are, for all the people that are so indignant about Andrew Tate, then I would challenge them to step up and to do something to counter his influence, because when there's no leaders around, you're going to follow whoever is being bold and loud and flashy and and fancy cars and all that.
Bugattis.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a good question to ask young men who admire Andrew Tate is, would you let your daughter date Andrew Tate?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's a good question. I think, like, truthfully, none of them would say yes.
Your sister,
no.
any female that you love more than anything, would you get on board with her dating somebody like that?
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah. No, I don't know. Andrew Tate is, I don't know. He has a really strong influence, and I think that a lot of people like see, I guess, the good in a lot of the basic truths that he does say. But in terms of his actions, I don't think that's something that a lot of people like should get behind. I mean, the stuff that he's being charged with, like sex trafficking, I think it's either him, his brother, or like someone else in the group is like has rape charges. I know they're going to charge him with or try to charge him, or they're investigating for fraud as well. That's, I don't know, stuff like that is like not someone you should look to for a role model. But no, yeah, it does definitely say something that, you know, the young men today, like, you know, feel the need to like follow someone like Andrew Tate. Because I know there's like other like people out there who genuinely do like give like really good advice, but they don't have the traction. They don't have, I guess, that shock factor that Andrew Tate has. Very flashy. Yeah. It's very materialistic, the stuff that, you know, he like preaches as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, yeah.
I just want to chime in. Sorry for interrupting. Just want to chime in a little bit. And maybe for our audience, does anyone like have a male like role model they like look up to, or like for our audience, someone that we'd recommend to look out towards? If anyone has any ideas.
True. Let us know in the comments below, guys.
Also that, but also I don't like to look to internet celebrities or stuff like that for role model. I try to look into my own family, because those are the people that lived, you know, retrospective to like close to my style of life usually. So like I like look to your father. Like I would say look to your father, your brothers, like that. But there is some people that I don't like to take entirely, like Jordan Peterson, stuff like that. I know stuff like that. I disagree with. You know, it should be these people are not your. People developed a very bad parasocial like relationship, whatever, with these internet celebrities, and it takes them down like a really bad path, like Andrew Tate and stuff like that. So I would say don't take any of these people entirely. You know, kind of nitpick. You know, trying to find things that's like does work in your life. You know, stuff like you don't. But I would say look more towards your family. No,
I do agree. Yeah, definitely like your family. But I mean, I feel like I don't know. I think Jordan Peterson is a really good like role model for like young like struggling men. And I think the way that, you know, a lot of people on the opposite end of the spectrum vilify Jordan Peterson, I mean, that just like makes like people like Andrew Tate like grow even more. You know, because if you're calling like Jordan Peterson all of these like awful like evil like things, you know, and then Andrew Tate comes and you call like him like the same thing that you're calling Jordan Peterson, it like loses value. It really loses value.
Point.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I think we should wrap it up right here.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's pretty good.
Oh, yeah. Great episode.
Yeah. It was great having you.
Of course.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah.
I love to talk politics.
All the time.
It's always fun.
Yeah. We usually don't talk politics too much on the podcast, but I enjoy it. I love it. It's amazing.
It's Mikhail's favorite.
Yes.
All right.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's good talk. All right. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube.
Yes.
Leave a like, comment, subscribe, all those wonderful things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anywhere you listen to your podcast, you could check us out, you know.
Even Spotify. Yep.
Oh, yeah. Amazing.
All right. See y'all.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Oh, yeah. It was amazing.
I didn't even answer my own question.
You could comment it, Vince. That's okay, Vince. You could comment it.